Hi, my name is Michelle Brennan, and on behalf of Sligo Library, I'd like to welcome you to the Word live here in Sligo Central Library and online. This is an association with the BA in Writing and Creative and Literature at ATU Sligo. Tonight, we're delighted to have Maura Gilligan as our special guest for February. Maura is a writer and community art facilitator based in Strandhill, Sligo. Maura's poetry and writing has been broadcast on RTE Radio and published in a number of anthologies, and she also wrote and produced The Tide is Coming, a book of Coney Island and Sligo Bay, the beautiful heritage book with contributions from photographer James Fraher and artist Catherine Fanning. Maura this evening will be in conversation with ATU Sligo's Dr Marion Dowd. And for music, as you've just heard, we'll have fabulous music from Anna Houston, Deirdre Correia and Ray Coen. We won't have an open mic tonight, or we won't have a Q&A session tonight, but we will have our open mic, which will be facilitated by Catherine Whitehead. Okay, so I'm going to officially hand you over to Marion to take over from me, and she'll bring you in through the rest of the evening. Thank you, and enjoy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with Maura tonight to discuss her beautiful book, A Tide is Coming, a book of Coney Island in Sligo Bay. It's such a gorgeous book, and if you haven't already got a copy or you haven't looked at it, I'd really encourage you. It's just such a beautiful piece of work, Maura. So as Michelle said, Maura has been in Sligo for a long time. She's been here since the 60s, but she was born in India. And she has such a great, I think, link to the landscape here in Sligo, and particularly the Coolera Peninsula. And this book is about Coney Island. It's a really deep dive into Coney Island and really, I suppose, a number of responses, artistic responses and poetic responses to this beautiful island. For anybody who doesn't know, Coney Island is in Sligo Bay. It's located between Ross's Point and Strandhill. So from Ross's Point, you can go there by boat, and from Strandhill, you can cross the causeway when the tide is low. And some of you will be familiar with lots of photographs of cars getting stuck when they didn't leave on time. So Maura, I suppose I wanted to start off by asking you if you could tell us about your first introduction to Coney Island and why it resonates so deeply with you.
Yeah, thanks, Marion. My first real experience of the island was when I was invited to stay there by my mother's cousins, Aileen and Nancy, and I had an enchanted visit and was enchanted, and that magic just seemed to stay with me ever since. So I suppose what resonated were probably two things. One, the sense of belonging when I got there and when I walked around the island and all that. The second was the closeness to nature, the access to nature and to quiet places by the shoreline that could be found there. So in relation to the sense of belonging, I was, as you said, born in India, and myself, my two brothers, one of whom is here at the moment, Dermot, happy birthday Dermot, and Kevin, and my sisters Rosie and Ethna. Ethna is here tonight too. We were brought up in Calcutta, and it was it was a very different experience. When we finally came back here, we came and went because my mother was from Sligo, my father from Glasgow. We would have gone to English schools over there, and everything was very sort of English. So I'm not sure I really knew where I was from. And I knew I was kind of seeking a sense of identity. It was quite hard for us, I think, when we came back to fit into the Strandhill of the 60s, because we were just, well, we were blow-ins, I suppose, you know. So certainly when the first sense I had of belonging was when my husband built our house on the side of Knocknarea Mountain up beside the Glen when we were in our 20s, and up there I thought was heaven, and I found a place that I really felt I could belong to. And some years later, going to the island, I had that same sense of recognition and belonging, and it sort of closed the circle for me. It completed my sense of being part of the whole Coolera Peninsula and its shorelines.
I mean, isn't that beautiful how I think we all have some place in the landscape? It might be where you're born, it might be somewhere that you visited as a tourist, but that really deep sense of connection to a place. And I think that's what makes the book so special, because it's infused. You use the word magic there, but that sense of identity and belonging, it's really heart and soul project. And that really comes across. So Maura, I think you're going to read one of your poems, Winter Evening on the Island.
Thanks, Marion. This poem was written, it was one of my earliest poems that I wrote on the island, And I don't know if any of you can remember the feeling of a really frosty late autumn or early winter evening when the sun is going down and the sky is just magic. There's this incredible last few bands of colour, and it's all stillness and quietness, and you can literally hear everything. Well, this was the basis of this poem. And doors open, of course, on the island. All the kitchen doors would be open, you know. So, winter evening on the island. Nature's dimmer switch gradually turns the light down on the 3rd of November and sends a rosy filter spilling like a soft scarf onto the hills, the lighthouse, the ocean, the cold grass and the whitewashed walls. Blues, greens and white shine through a pink muslin haze, and sounds walk in the kitchen door. The rhythmic chomping of winter grass in the mouths of cows is disturbed by the spluttering of a boat crossing Shrunamila. A curlew calls, and the loud whisper of a flock of starlings landing cuts his long note short.
I suppose as an archaeologist, I really appreciate beautiful artifacts, and this book is one of those. It's such a beautiful thing. The paper, the images, the photographs, the poems. It's a real feast for the senses. And I wanted to ask you about why you decided to make a book in this way.
Well, I would be a little bit of an artist myself in terms of just doing bits and pieces at home. And I've always loved paper, good paper, colour, beautiful texts, fonts, things like that. But so my dream, in order to pay sufficient homage to the island in a book, was to have an art book. And I never think solely in words. I think in colours and in sound. And I was gifted to have as my collaborators and friends James, who's here tonight, James and Catherine. I see Catherine. Oh, that's brilliant. And I had done some marvellous arts projects with James and Catherine over the years. James is the photographer who produced all the beautiful photographs in the book, very well known in his own right. Catherine, similarly, is an artist very well known in her own right, and she's Saint Catherine of the Arts in Sligo, I think, as well, as all us artists know. So we had worked together quite a bit, but one of the most special parts of my time with them was the trips to Coney Island, the field trips, as we called them. And on those trips, we would, luckily they were as interested in the landscape and the story as I was, and we would pop into the pub to John McGowan and chat to him and get more stories and more photos, and Catherine would have more ideas for sketches or whatever. And then we would also often have tea in the house with John and his wife Margaret, who showed us great hospitality. So over time, Catherine and James gathered a huge archive of material together, which they, I'm very grateful to say, allowed me to use in the book. So really, I had the basis of the art book there, Marion, and the rest happened through my publisher in Dingle and her designer, Karen, who allowed me free rein to choose every word to go beside every image and things like that. So yeah, that's how the book came about.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I know from your work, you really like collaboration, and so it can be difficult sometimes to get the right combination, but it's worked wonderfully here. So you're going to read Island Lullaby for us.
All right, thank you. So this is just a tiny wee poem. Again, just listening in the stillness. In this case, it would have been a summer evening. Seaweed crackling, dried and spurned. Seabirds where the current churns. Oyster catchers, gulls and terns. evening on the island. Moonlight, silver on the strand, Oyster Island's lighthouse scans boats guided by the metal man, nighttime on the island. Knocknarea in stillness sitting, dewdrop grass makes wet feet glisten. Shellfish sitting, if you listen, morning on the island.
You mentioned John McGowan there, and Brian Layden in his foreword to the book said John McGowan was a true elder, the conscience and soul of the place from where he came and where he lived his entire life. So John McGowan features very prominently in the book. That was a very important part of this. So how important was it to have somebody like that to speak to about the island, and who had that real depth of knowledge that only comes with being born and raised in a place like that?
It's the heart of the book, really and truly, Marion. And Dermot Healy had encouraged me greatly to go ahead with the old style of interview with John, to sit with him, to write. It was years before we did any recordings, and John was very happy to share his story, being the only person who lived on the island from birth until death into modern times. So it was really wonderful being entrusted with his stories for the book. And if he were still around, I think I'd still be going out for more stories, because there were always more, Yeah.
And so how many years were you interviewing John and speaking to him?
That really went on for at least 20 years, I would say, because between tides and times and farming and all sorts of things going on, to capture him for a little while was quite an achievement, But he was a most interesting man, and most interested in the world and everything about it. He was also a really strategically minded person who adored every blade of grass on the island, but yet had the island's future in mind, and he would strategically plan what was going to happen, and was always trying to make things better. One of I think the most touching interviews in the book is the one about the marram grass, and where John recognises that the entire bank to the south of the pier on the north side of the island would be swept away because chunks of it were being taken away by the sea. So he researched and found out all about marram grass, or the bent grass, and he knew there was some of it on the back of the island, and he began the restoration of that part of the island by walking over quite a distance, digging up the grass, carrying it in sackfuls on his back, and bringing it over, planting it bit by bit. It's a beautiful story. We could carry it right into this moment now. We tried to do it a little bit in Strandhill in recent times, but if everybody had his care and attention to the land, it would be wonderful. He did succeed in recovering, quite a lot of land, yeah.
I mean, that's a wonderful legacy that, you can still see. So Deirdre is going to sing a song for us now, and this is a poem by Patrick Campbell, and Deirdre arranged the music and the vocals to it, and it really ties in with the farming history of the island and John's knowledge of that aspect.
I will go with my father a-ploughing to the green field by after me. I will sing to the patient horses with the lark in the shine of the air, and my father will sing the plough song that blesses that leaving share, that blesses that leaving share. Sowing to the red field by the sea, and the rooks and the gulls and the starlings will come flocking after me. I will sing to the striding sowers with the finch on the flowering sloe, and my father will sing the seed song that only the wise men know, that only the wise men know. I will go with my father a-reaping to the brown field by the sea, and the geese and the crows and the starlings will come flocking after me. I will sing to the weary reapers with the wren in the heat of the sun, and my father will sing the side song that joys for the harvest done, that joys for the harvest done.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read one of Maura's poems now called Summer Rain. Across a whitewashed wall, the rain falls on potato stalks. It glides down trees, washes leaves, makes nettles dance. A black crow in the sycamore keeps watch on field and shore. So, Maura, one of the pieces you have in your book talks of emigration and the depopulation of the island. So you write that born on the 27th of January 1937, John grew up amid a population of 35 or so people. Mm-hmm. And I think about 100 years earlier, there was about 140 people. But that's completely gone now. There's been a quite an extreme depopulation of the island. And I suppose that comes across quite strongly in the book, that current of immigration and the idea of people who are strongly connected to the island but have left, and also the people who are left behind, and a sense of kind of longing or loss there, and the unspoken in some cases. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, that's something that certainly that John felt very strongly, because he was aware that people had left. He was very puzzled by the fact that they wouldn't have realised they could possibly keep going and keep fed with the shellfish and fish, and that vegetables apart from potatoes could be grown, and that sort of thing. And he was sort of always heartbroken that to think that so many people had chosen to go off around the world, very often on coffin ships, not reaching their destination. And one of the hardest parts for him was that the older people didn't talk about anybody who was gone. He got remnants of that information as years went on, and relatives came back seeking people or saying that their ancestors had come from Coney Island. But that was the way of the times. The times were very hard and people just got on with it. They didn't discuss or have emotional talks, or discuss hardship. And when the people were gone, they were gone, So he did find that very sad as well, the lack of information also.
I mean, there's a lot of grief there, isn't there, for an island population when people, especially if lots of people go. And I think that's interesting, even the name itself, Coney Island, comes from Coen, rabbits. And in a way, it's symbolic that rabbits have taken over the island, and it's named for rabbits rather than humans.
Well, honestly, and in fact, I should have included rabbits, because John, he had included rabbits as one of the food sources that were very, very much in supply, and that could have kept people alive. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
So, Maura, you're going to read At Coney Island Pier.
Yeah. So this poem is based around the small area of the pier and what's called the boathouse there, and it was inspired really in a way by another great son of the island, Michael Layden, a great character whom several people knew. He went off to sea. He literally jumped on a Greek boat leaving Sligo Harbour at the age of 16, and they were heartbroken on the island, and they were all out waving cloths, towels, hankies, anything to say goodbye to him, So it was that was a very sad time. So he continued to come back. He was a very well-respected merchant seaman, and he continued to come back to the island again and again. And eventually, Marion, when he was about, I think, maybe around 70 or so, he erected this plaque at the boathouse in memory of the boys and girls of Coney Island. There's a beautiful photo that James took of it there. And it says, "To the memory of the men and women, boys and girls who left Coney Island for America, Australia, England and Canada, and are buried in those foreign lands," erected by Michael Layden. So this short poem is At Coney Island Pier. A wind from the paddock sends gusts through low concrete arches. A lobster pot sieves sand and shingle. A web of nets slumps in the corner of the boathouse. Nets that knew the heft and weight of fish, slung on the shoulders of the island men, lurching the length of briar lanes, or wading past the rabbit house while pale rain washed the brook under an ever-altering sky. By the upturned hull of Michael Layden's boat, the nets now shelter in a drift of sand, in the lee of his tablet of stone, his memorare to islanders exiled.
I think one of the key pieces in the book is Litany of the Ancestors, and it gives a really rich insight into the communities and the families and people of the island over generations and the different professions, and it's a very alive poem, and it's a beautiful way to remember all of those people. So we're going to read about this we're going to read this poem in a minute, but do you want to tell us some more about this piece?
Yeah, well, I thought it seemed to me that there were so many amazing physical occupations. There was so much physical work in that time. Everything was hard won, hard got. It involved going out no matter what the weather was, and just providing food, really providing food, and looking after animals and creating shelter and trying to create warmth if at all possible. So in my imagination as well, I was thinking of all the stories John had told me, and I just thought, I pictured each section of the island and what was done in each of those, the fields, the barley field, the pier, the paddock, all the different places. And I wrote this as a tribute to all of the occupations that are now gone. Excuse me. But a very nice thing happened just a couple of weeks ago. I was contacted by a 94-year-old gentleman whose father had been a lightkeeper on Oyster Island and who had grown up with John McGowan. He had come by the book, and he said that this particular litany, he got quite emotional. He said, I lived every task in that. You know, he said, I've did every one of those jobs. I know that. So that was a nice link to have that. So I think we're all going to take part in this one now.
Litany of the Ancestors. Lighters of the Channel Lights, guardians of safe passage, oarsmen of the roaring tides, natives of this island. Menders of nets at Port Nabui, creators of fenders and floats, ferrymen and women of Shrunamila, repairers of wooden boats.
Stokers of Limekiln, minders of the carbon lights, gleaners of carbide ash, stirrers of each year's whitewash, fishers of mackerel and mullet and herring, casters of nets on the nighttime tides, champion rowers of Sligo Bay races, finders of salvage on sandy shorelines,
Islanders,
Keepers of fowl, hens, ducks and geese, pursuers of the thieving fox, carriers of fodder to far-flung fields, handlers of horses and dogs, builders of briars, stone walls and jetties, scrapers and painters of hull, prow and stern, washers of garments spread on the hedges, fetchers of water from pump and from well,
Hunters and snarers of rabbit and hare, readers of weather from wind, sea and sky, kindlers of firewood, sodden and salty, givers of thanks when flames took light, senders of signals, strainers of ropes, tiers of knots, launchers of boats.
sowers and planters and reapers, breakers of rock and stone, ploughers of deep dark furrows, earthworkers, gardeners, in springtimes long gone, islanders. Lighters of tapers and kippings and mantles, lighters of candles and paraffin lamps, lighters of bonfires to mark island weddings, trimmers of wicks in the cold and the damp.
Diggers of lugworm, cockles, razors, cutters of carrigan core, schlowick and rack, pickers of mussels, barnock and winkles, hefters of weighty sacks, twisters of hay ropes and makers of windrows, mowers of meadows with sickle and scythe, thrashers of grain with an eye on the ocean, casters of nets on high evening tides.
Bearers of news from the boats and the mainland, tellers of tales at night by the fire, players of card games in houses in winter, carters of horse-drawn supplies,
Islanders.
gatherers of shellfish, salters of the herring, builders of haycocks, tyers of stooks, stackers of barrels at the season's ending, fishers at midnight at the smooth green brook.
Drovers of cattle in wind, hail and rain, bakers each day of fresh soda bread, collectors of mushroom and dark autumn berries, sharer of news with all on the road, spreaders of cartloads piled high with rich seaweed, cutters of sallies, thatchers of roofs, bearers of tea to the men in the hayfields, tenders to stones in the cart horses' hooves.
Pausers for prayer at the Angelus bell, passengers in boats to mass across swells, sayers and prayers of rosaries nightly, murmurers of litanies on tired bended knee.
Readers of papers from cover to cover, debaters of topics and news of the times, singers and actors of plays in Flood's attic, creators of that clime.
Seers and sages on shingle and shore, your skills live on in our lore, Islanders.
What's wonderful about that poem is that most of us have never done any of those activities or professions. And I suppose it really shows how times have changed, you know, in the space of 50 or 60 years, where in the past somebody might have 10 or 15 or 20 skills. And nowadays we seem to have just one and we can only do one thing. So yeah, that's a reckoning to all of us.
Ironic.
I was very interested as an archaeologist, Maura, in one of your pieces about the sailor's grave. It was a site I excavated, and then a few years later I found your book and I found a piece that you had written about it. And I suppose it's always wonderful to see that, how, you know, other people can look at archaeology and, you know, find it meaningful, not just archaeologists. And you called it renaming. And I suppose that's one of the interesting things about this site. It was a 2,500-year-old Bronze Age, what we call a phylacteria, but it had kind of entered the consciousness of people on Coney Island as something different. It was known as a lover's wishing well. And if you wanted to find out who you would fall in love with, you lay down in this 2,500-year-old site, and you would their image would come to your mind. And it was also called a sailor's grave, and that was a very strong tradition. And I suppose what it makes us realise is, you know, you've really brought the recent past of Coney Island to life, but also you're touching on the people who have been there for thousands of years and who lived there. So I'm going to read a little piece from that, from your prose piece. So it's called A Renaming by Maura. So for many years, the sailor's grave, or the grave on the shore, had not revealed its presence. John's mother referred to it as the grave on the shore and had shown it to him once as a child. John felt its dimensions were small for a grave. He would occasionally see it emerge on the shoreline west of the pier when the sand was stripped back by high tides, revealing it for a short while. Then at the end of the summer of 2014, an important discovery was made by a regular visitor to the island, Kieran Davis. The stone rectangle on the beach was finally given its correct categorization. It was a phylacteria, a traditional pit or earth oven used for bathing and cooking in prehistoric times. Water was heated by stones from a nearby fire. The grave on the shore was laid to rest.
That's it.
So the sea and the coastline is so central to this book.
Maura, and part of it is that you created this oral aspect as well. So it's, you know, I think bringing in all of the senses, and that's captured very much in Lighters of the Channel Lights, which was written when you were an artist in residence here in Sligo. So what prompted you to create this piece, and why was it important?
Well, the piece actually began, part of it began as a poem on one dark, stormy September night in my caravan on the island, when the wind was whipping up. It was pitch black dark, and I couldn't help imagining, I was picturing again all the different locations of what was happening at the pier, down at the sluice gap, at the different directions. And I had begun that but never got to finish it. And then the artist residency, which I had hoped to have in Maura, working with a group of older people, I had a dream there of doing a sea song, creating a sea song or song of the sea with them, getting their stories and possibly linking them down the coast all the way down to Ross's Point and Coney Island. Because of COVID, that didn't happen, and I had to rethink the project, which I did by doing telephone interviews and some sketches and things myself. It eventually became a part of an exhibition with 3 other artists, but the song was part of it. So I honoured that. I honoured the people. I hope all the boatmen of that local North Sligo down to this coast here, in the song, and I also honoured the 3 boatmen from Coney Island who travelled out year after year, night after night, week after week, no matter what the weather was like, before there was ever a lighthouse or a light of any sort in the channel. And they went out to light the buoys and the buoys and the various lights with old lanterns every single night. And they provided safe guidance for boats coming up the channel. Everyone knows Sligo Harbour, the channel is like a narrow snake and has to be negotiated by a pilot and all of that. And in those days, believe it or not, there were boats on every tide. They were John McGowan's words, but that's how busy Sligo Harbour was. So it was a huge service that they provided. Anyway, the song was written and I had a melody in my head, a simple melody, and then my great, great friends sitting down there, Deirdre, Anna and Ray, agreed to come on board, and Ray did a beautiful arrangement of the song, and it was recorded at the Doolittle Studios, and Anna's sister Karen came along, just happened to be there and joined in on the Fidola magnificent edition, and Maria McLaughlin, our friend from Ross's Point, played the accordion on it. So that was the story of the Lighters of the Channel Lights. It came about through a whole set of coincidences, but it still linked the people of North Sligo to the people of Sligo Bay and Coney Island. Yeah.
And I suppose the musical heritage of Coney Island itself.
Yes.
So we're going to have Deirdre and Ray and Anna now perform Lighters of the Channel Lights.
The waves fling angry spray on high, and from the shifting stones draw sighs. The marram grass is flattened down towards the east and Sligo town. The dusk has darkened into night, and in its shade the curlews fly. Unseen is just melodic call below the low travage. The pier has long since been submerged beneath a wave that meets the verge of a windswept common and Port Nabui, where salt and sand and water play. Yet three men leave the island shore to light the channel lights. No matter that Shrunamila roars and the point is hid from sight, they must take the hurricane lamps all trimmed and ready to light. For the seabed is shallow and the channel is narrow, and there's boats on every tide. Out on the black rock, fierce gales pound. This night the Atlantic knows no bounds. It scales the lighthouse walls with ease and hides the beam of light that sails. Each time they cast out from the shore, old Dan, young Dan and Pat, there's not a one can know for sure that they'll be coming back. Yet still they row out from the shore in hail and leaping seas to light each perch and buoy once more, giving skippers and pilots ease.
Their dreams hold storm and starlight, and terror of fog round Oyster's shore, and moonless nights of dark and calm, when golden sea fire sparked their oars. Once 3 men left the island shore, that ships might see their way. Now they're part of island lore and tales of Sligo Bay.
So this is a good place to end. I'd like to thank you, Maura, for coming here tonight and talking to us. And again, I'd really encourage all of you to take a look at this beautiful book. Lever are here at the back of the room, and they have copies for sale if anybody is interested. And just to wish you continued good luck and success with the book, Maura. It's beautiful.
Thank you very much, Marion. Thanks a million. Thank you.
And I'm just going to invite Catherine Whitehead up to introduce the open mic. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Our first reader this evening is Caleb McKeever from third year at Writing and Literature in the ATU. Caleb.
Hello. This is an excerpt from my portfolio piece for third year. They were surrendering, Sergeant. They were surrendering. His words struck William like a bolt from the blue, cutting straight to the pain in his chest with a sudden crack of intensity. He staggered back, eyes wide and jaw slackened, his ears ringing as though he had been standing an inch from a howitzer shot. Marcus wrestled himself free and began frantically explaining his version of events in a muffled voice as Sykes barked back at him in equally inaudible words. All the while, Lord Everett just stood silently, arms folded as he watched things proceed. He, on the other hand, found himself turning his gaze inward, feeling sicker and sicker by the moment as the horrible truth slowly dawned on him. Rats don't scream like that. Was William truly facing down an insurmountable swarm of rodents, or had he stumbled upon the refuge of those few Christians who were too wounded to put up a fight? Was that the incessant chittering of rats, or the pleas and screams of living, breathing people as they begged for their lives? He wasn't blind to the way the world was. He had killed men before, and he had seen good friends die. But that was always in the heat of combat, when they could put up a fight. And he had just consigned 24 people to death in the worst way possible. It was all coming back. Their gargling screams as their flesh was doused in burning napalm, the stench of scorched hair and rendered fat, the damning silence following the last survivor's death. The world seemed to warp and waver around him, pulsing with red mist and time to every heartbeat. The voices of his comrades were drowned out, accusations and admonishments alike, by a single piercing tone as William slowly turned his head to see the dog sitting close by him. Didn't I tell you I would shoulder your burden? That I would make it easier on you? It opened its mouth to pant. The edges of its maw began to split open, exposing more and more sharp, crooked fangs. What have you done? William breathed, his own voice weak as a whisper. A coarse, scathing laugh rasped from its throat. Blood flowed from the cracks in its skin as its body swelled and lengthened. Pronounced spinal ridges jutted from its back as bullet holes opened themselves up in the side of its body, matting its wiry red fur with more filth. Don't act so surprised. You've always seen them as such. It's what you are taught. I just brought the reality to bear. William turned his head to fully gaze at the demon whispering in his ear, a dog no longer, but a ravenous beast. Iverson. William couldn't break eye contact. Its eyes blazed just like the flamethrower jets. It could smell his guilt, and it was relishing every moment. Iverson! He felt sick. The smell of burned flesh still lingered in the back of his throat. The red fog intensified alongside the pain in his chest until only the beast was visible, smiling with a crooked maw. Corporal Iverson! The sergeant backhanded him, completely ripping him from his trance.
Thank you, Caleb. And next we call on Lee Gurney, also third year student at ATU Writing and Literature.
Hello. I am going to be performing some lighthearted poems that I wrote. They all have something to do with my experience of playing video games over my entire life. So my first one is called First Contact. Breakneck speed across a beach, careless drifting through a haunted mansion. First place and the trophy is within reach. A sudden blue missile, the race gains tension. The star, rainbow power, blow past Peach. Angry bullet takes no prisoners, no longer losing. Lap 3, last, losing temper. Tempt to impeach the device, break the hinges with overextension. And now your sister is mad and she tells mom that she needs a new DS. The second poem I'll be doing is called Player Has Joined the Game. They have arrived at last. At last, you make it sound like there's a rush. I'm interested to see just what this player can accomplish in a world of their own. Set not your sights on where it might arrive. Let it enjoy the journey. Should we step in if something goes wrong for them? No, but no. Do not take this joy from them. The joy in failure? Yes, without it, success means nothing. There is endless beauty in trial and error. And what if it gives up? Then it will leave us and move on to other things. So we just observe? We are humble spectators. The player must experience on its own the sorrow and sadness as much as the joy and jubilation. We will teach it far more from a distance than we could ever in direct discourse. They have been here for a while. They have dug a hole, but not yet severed the tree. I fear for them. That is natural. You'd have me fear, but not interfere? Are we not cruel for this? A harsh lesson for a young sprout. Does a plant not need watering, sheltering from storms, sunlight in droves? We have left them hints. We tell them not the answer, but there is a path if they dare to uncover it. It won't be easy watching them struggle, but if you love them, you'll see that they'll make their own way, and you'll realize it was meant to be this way all along, and that it was beautiful, getting to watch them fall and get back up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. And next I'd like to call on Owen Sproul, also a third year student at the Writing and Literature in ATU.
Thank you. Hello, this poem is based on one of the 7 deadly sins, this time being wrath. Anger controls me as if I'm the puppet and Satan is pulling the strings. I hate my weakness. If I was stronger, I could have protected the ones I love. I get mad at the stupid system our country is built on. For decades, those in charge screwed over citizens and abused women, thinking a payout would heal all wounds. But the trauma is generational. I detest how violent this world has become. Unaware my wrath repeats the cycle, breathing more disdain. Like a lion eating its prey, it wells up inside of me, seeing neither forest nor tree. I suppress the emotions. Like an undertaker, I bury them, but they still rise from the grave. Unresolved issues of the past rising up. I try to swallow them, but it causes me to throw up. The crimson aura engulfs me, but I know the last thing we need is another angry white guy. I hide the feelings in my back pocket. Does it make me a monster or a human? I fear losing anger the most, because then I would have lost all capacity to care. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. I have 2 little short poems I'm going to attempt. They are both about winter in the garden. And the first is kind of the approach of winter, and it's called Twilight. It's that nice kind of a time when you don't see any jobs to be done in the garden and you're kind of feeling a little bit magical. Hedge sparrows argue tirelessly in the trees. A gentle breeze disturbs thin branches. Car lights flow down from the high road, a lantern procession. All is pretty at this hour. The wind hoops up a delicious harmony in the oaks. Bare branches sketch a silhouette over a winter sky where faint colours pool like watercolour on unprimed canvas. No moon yet. The water fountain is asleep, though the little cherub still holds her urn upward, expectant. Thank you. This one is more approaching the spring. Oysters. Winter sun warm on my face, a breeze moves the odd dead leaf. The crows cry across the garden from the ash tree to the telephone wire, announcing my arrival. Heather's radiant purples today against the mossy grass. Why is it always more alive out here in the garden? Why am I not here? Instead of passing through from car to home and back again, what calls me inside is never more important than being here listening. Listening to the bees hover or the blackbirds thrill about the grass. I see the god big sky, blue today, wisps of white on a slow amble across it, lazy now like me, not in a hurry to be anywhere. Some daffodils are starting to stretch and poke their faces over the fence. And birds, always birds, show us life and life being lived. I cannot write their sounds. Everything is moving gently, like the rocking in a lullaby, like my pencil scratching over the page. The dozen or so oysters shells I'd arranged beside the plant pots have come through the winter. They gleam up at me now, iridescent purple, silvers and aquamarines. Anne Morrow Lindbergh wrote in her book, Gift from the Sea, that oyster shells were a symbol of a happy, long marriage. I liked that he gave them to me, thought I'd enjoy looking at them, and I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for that and for all the open mic participants this evening. And I must compliment Catherine and Maura's scarf. It seems in keeping with the book covers as well, the island and the water and the sea. So I just want to thank Maura and Marion for this fabulous evening. Maura for helping us slightly change the format this evening and gave us a kind of different version of the word. And I think it was inspired. It was just absolutely beautiful. The music and poetry was just stunning, especially at the poem Islanders. I think we could have all got involved with that in the end. It was just fantastic. The music with Anna, Deirdre and Ray has just been absolutely beautiful. I'm so glad you joined us. And it was a very wintry evening today, and it just feels like it just was part of the environment, that we're in here. Just thanks to everybody as well for coming out this evening, in this wintry evening. It's great of you to join us. And thanks to the open mic guests for joining us. And before we move on to our final piece of song, our final piece of music, I just want to tell you about a few upcoming events. So our March edition of The Word will feature Bridget Hurricane. She's the author of Finding Mangan, and then our April edition of The Word will feature Elaine Garvey, who's the author of The Wardrobe Department, which has been getting rave reviews. We have a Seachtain na Gaeilge coming up in March, and we have a regular Circle Core every 2 weeks. And in March, we'll have a special guest, Frank Reedy, joining for it. That's on the 14th, if you'd like to join us. And we have workshops, we have computer workshops, lots of events coming up over the next few weeks and months. And if you're you'd like to receive notification of these, you can leave your contact details at the desk. And also, if any of you are not members of the library yet, you can get your own library card for free. You can go to sligolibrary.ie and you can access all these events and workshops for free, and everything we do is free. So I'll let you enjoy the last of the music, agus. Thank you, agus Garam Agat.